Hello and welcome to Das Nostalgia Podcast, episode 23. As usual, I'm your host Anatoly, and today with me I have another fantastic guest in my virtual studio for your listening pleasure. Sir, please introduce yourself.
Hi everybody, my name is Agustín Cordes, big fan of iOS, computer games, adventure games in particular, and life led me to become a game developer. I know, I'm sorry. I feel, about 10 years, actually no, much more than that. In 2003 I began working on a horror adventure game called Scratches, which was miraculously released in 2006, 3 years later, and it sort of became a well-known adventure game in the genre. And I sort of have been trying ever since to complete Asylum, the spiritual successor to Scratches. And that's pretty much who I am, the Scratches and Asylum guy, more or less.
Nice. Which actually kind of circles back. I'm gonna let the audience peek behind the scenes a little bit. I've been trying to get you on this podcast for like 2.5 years to talk specifically
You're right.
About horror games. I guess a thing that everybody wants to talk to you about. And it just happened that this podcast been very quickly thrown together.
It was like, okay, let's do it.
Well, that's the best way to do things. But before we go into our topic, which is very interesting to me, I always like when people sort of come on and talk about stuff that I don't know much about. But before we get to that, do you, sir, have a story about your first encounter with an IBM PC or compatible?
Yeah. It was. I think I can't remember the time, but I was like 7 or 8 years old. This was in 1987, so around that year. And the first direct contact was in the university where my father taught physics or math. I can't remember, but because both my mother and father worked, my father took with me to his classes, and he needed to give me something to entertain myself while he gave the classes. So he got no better idea than put a screen in front of me with Space Invaders, and
Nice.
and I think I have been addicted to games ever since. We're talking about the CGA version of Space Invaders.
Well, of course.
I think that was my first contact with games in general. So
Nice.
that's a very important moment for me. But the moment I became more attached to computers, I think it was when my uncle, for some reason I can't quite recall, he brought a computer, an XT, to my place, a monochrome XT, and
Nice.
I don't know, he needed to repair it, or it was supposed to stay at home for a few days. And over that period of days, let's say maybe 3-4 days, there was only one game loaded in that computer. That game was Jumpman. Dude, I can't tell you just how many hours I spent playing Jumpman on that computer. That was, what a fantastic game.
Nice.
What a fantastic game. And I think, after that, I just insisted my father, you have to buy a computer because these things are amazing. My future is in these fucking computers.
Right.
Can I swear in your podcast?
Yes,
Okay,
we
cool.
can swear, and I do.
Fuck yeah. And so then my father bought I think it was an AT, so it's like we stepped up a bit, but with an Hercules monitor. An Amber, right? And I think the other games I played was Saxon. I don't know what else. So really, those short
right, sort of
games.
arcade conversions of the 80s.
Anyway, the next minute he comes home with a couple of pirated discs. I'm sorry, but
Of course,
back then
we did it.
We pirated everything in Argentina. I'm really sorry, but I did buy games afterwards. But anyway, those discs contained next quest, and as they say, the rest is history. Because that's when I knew I wanted to make games. Sure, that's a
Hmm.
way to make. But
Yeah.
anyway, we are like talking way too much about that subject.
No, that's good. All right. Well, so we're here today, and as I mentioned, I'm going to discover a lot of this with the listeners. I'm sure we're going to talk about Spanish language games, and I also in your story, I'm actually going to circle back a little bit. So that first machine was also an IBM compatible or clone before the XT.
Yeah,
So you started right off from the actual PCs.
I mean, I think I'm not quite sure because they also had an Apple II with a hard hat Mac
Mm-hmm.
or Burger Time, I can't recall, at the university. So I think it was an IBM PC, but maybe I'm a heretic and started with an Apple. I'm not sure.
All right.
I'm
Well,
not quite sure.
because one thing that I did my a little bit of my research for this podcast, and when I looked at all these games clearly came out of sort of European sort of gaming culture of 8-bit computers. They're all well. First of all, I would like to say that probably none of them counted on PCs as being their dominant platform, right? Most of them come from like Amstrad or Spectrum. I mean, they were very much inspired. I grew up playing a lot of Spectrum games, so
Okay.
on PC, they developed very differently in a way. So those games are clearly inspired by the games from those 8-bit sort of computer era. So, which is, well, I mean, again, there aren't many games like that on PC and on DOS. So it's nice to see like a whole group of games that sort of like adheres to those design principles that have long been forgotten. I mean, maybe for the best in some cases, but
Yeah. We're going to talk about that. But if I recall correctly, I think because we Argentina has always been a sort of poor country. We're doing a bit better, unfortunately. But I think the dominant computer here has always been the PC. Maybe Commodore 64 at some point, but as far as I remember, I mean, everybody I knew the PC was their primary gaming platform, right?
oh, nice.
So I mean, at least in Argentina, it was always PC here. I mean, I don't think I have ever seen an Amstrad CPC here. I have seen Spectrums, ColecoVisions maybe, but Amstrad is definitely a very European thing.
Well, take it away, sir. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wanted to tell you a bit because we are going to talk mostly about games from Spain, like Spanish games from Spain. If I can tell you a bit about Argentina, truth is that we had one notorious game made in the 80s, and particularly notorious because it's from 1983, if I recall correctly. So it's a very,
early
title. It's called Truco, and it's probably our most famous Argentinian game. Truco is it's an Argentinian card game, and sadly, it's not well known. Maybe in Uruguay, but it's not well known overseas. And it's a very fun game. I'm going to say it's can be as challenging and as entertaining as a game of poker, maybe, especially when you play with lots of people. And anyway, this game Truco by the Arbicer brothers, we in a local game event a couple of years ago, we gave them a sort of commemorative prize, like a distinction,
right.
and because they are the developers who pretty much kickstarted the Argentinian game. And I think it's actually the only DOS game we have. I mean, we are that young industry, and this game Truco, I'm actually looking for it in movie games, and it's not even listed.
Right.
So
right.
it's a really, really rare game. I wanted to confirm the date, but I think it's 1983. But anyway, that's why we're going to talk mostly about games from Spain because
Right.
in Argentina we don't have much to talk about. Okay, come to the OS games.
Right, right. And I'm gonna say that I am gonna attempt to pronounce the names of those games at some point. So I
Oh,
apologize for probably inadvertently ruining and mispronouncing a lot of things. I know exactly zero Spanish, but I think I'm up for it. So
okay, no, don't worry, don't worry. Yeah, I can tell you the right pronunciation. So yeah, we made a quick list here, and again, the games I talked to you about, these are games that I play the most. They are not, the most. I mean, I think they are some of the most popular Spanish games, but I may be leaving out a noteworthy title that I didn't play. For example, I am aware of Abu Simbel by Dynamic Software.
hmm
Abu Simbel is one of the most famous Spanish games. I did not play that one. I think it's one of the most famous ones because it's one of the earliest ones, dating back to 1985. And I think it's partially inspired by Jet Set Willy or that sort
yeah, that sort of thing.
of thing. Yeah, yeah. You go through a maze and you need to solve like room-based problems or puzzles. It's more arcade more than anything else. But I don't think I ever played the game. It's called Abu Simbel Profanation. That's one. I don't know if you know it, but you
No,
might
never
want
heard
to
of
check
it,
it.
but I'll check
You,
it out for
you
sure.
should check it out. You don't need to know Spanish. I actually it's in English even. Um, Definitely a very interesting game because it's possibly one of the earliest games from Spain I can think about. The other one, yeah, actually, yeah, 1985. Because the other one we are going to talk about, it's La Abadía del Crimen or
hmm
AV Crime. I mean, let's start about that one because
It's a big one. That's the one I
it's
knew
a
about.
big one. I mean, let's get it out of our system because it's the big one. It's I mean, it's possibly the most popular Spanish game
It's
ever.
it's it's very
To
well
say
known in the
very well
sort
known.
of computer retro gaming community. Well, it's also in the like all these games are came out on a variety of 8-bit platforms. I mean
Uh-huh.
computers. So where shall we start? Well, let me say what at least what I know because that's one of those games that I can talk about a little bit.
Hmm?
So it's an isometric adventure game, very much inspired by like 8-bit,
Hell or Hill.
yeah, like that sort of thing, and maybe I'm thinking Fairlight, on the Spectrum. It's not on PC,
Oh no, I don't know that one. No.
but it's on C64 and stuff. So that's that kind of a thing, or like the ultimate isometric adventures. So it's clearly sort of inspired by that. But it's weird because so it's based on the Umberto Eco book, right?
Hmm?
About a monk who is essentially plays a detective in the abbey,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
strange things have been going on, a murder and other strange things.
yeah. The name of the rose. It's
Oh yes, that's right. Okay, so and well, that's you need to know Spanish to play it. So it's a
yeah,
bit out of my reach. Well, at least that version, and
yeah, yeah. It's
and
lots of remakes.
yeah, and so you sort of walk around in this open world, and you have day and night cycles, and you talk to people, and you have inventory and stuff. Well, that's about as much as I know. So I let's
Okay.
let's discuss
Um.
what's more more hands-on experience.
Well, yeah, I did play it ages ago. Not when it was released. I think I played it in mid 90s maybe. And the thing about La Abadía, it hasn't aged well. Okay, let's be honest about that.
Well,
This is a game.
like most of those games, to be honest.
I think none of these has aged very well. If we are going to be like really honest, maybe Risky Woods is the only one. But anyway, we get to that one. La Badia is particularly noteworthy because it was like a technical marvel at the time. Um, because it's a very large game for the era. I mean, it's the AV. It's quite large, and it's particularly well. The location is particularly well designed. They
Mm-hmm.
also manage. I mean, it has almost no low loading times. It's a seamless experience. I think it's particularly more noteworthy because of the spectrum, because they managed to put all this into a
Yes.
64K.
48.
48, no, sorry, yeah. 48, yeah. I mean, it's even more impressive.
It is, yes.
uh, I mean, maybe it's not that impressive on PC, but on the spectrum, I
Yeah.
think it's the most technically advanced game on the spectrum, but don't.
Uh,
I
elite,
think
elite, man.
Okay, elite. Okay, okay, elite. But this is the second. I mean,
It's
and
pretty open world and it's pretty. Oh, we shouldn't make those claims. There have been a lot of very advanced games in the spectrum.
okay, but anyway, I mean, for Spain, just think about Spain.
Yes,
I mean,
out of all those games, especially considering like I looked at the and as I was going through that list, even contemporary games, none of them are particularly technically noteworthy. This is like a hardcore, like open world isometric adventure, like the ones they used to make, in the UK. So yeah, it's really impressive.
but I mean, yeah, and for Spain, I mean, right now the Spanish market, other than Pendulo and some other games, it's not what it used to be. So we could, I mean, we say very often golden age, golden age. I think that the term it's perfectly applied to Spain in this case. I mean,
Hmm.
Spain had a true golden age of software. They were like very competitive in the game industry. I mean, one of the countries that produced. I mean, some of these companies produced really, I mean, good games for the time in a period of maybe 3 4 years. I mean, we can review some of these lists afterwards, but in the 80s we're talking about a
Yeah.
company producing dozens of games, just
Yes.
one company. So we are really talking about a golden age of Spanish software, and La Abadía was the pinnacle.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
it
Absolutely.
was like you said, an open world sort of adventure, in which all the characters have like their own agenda. I mean, we did see this in adventure games, notably Deadline,
Hmm.
they were like text adventures. So they did it in with graphics. I'm tempted to say, okay, my memory is failing me recently, but I'm tempted to say this is maybe the first graphical adventure that attempted that, like a true open world approach with characters doing their stuff, like they had like a sort of very rough AI that you could like follow people around and that sort of stuff. So it was fairly advanced for that.
It's
I mean,
sad, but it's clear.
1987. 1987. Let's think about that.
And the DOS version, I'm going to point out, DOS version is done in CGA, as many of those games are, but it's
68.
actually uses CGA really, really well. The
Mhm.
environments are really vibrant, and the graphics are colorful, and the sound is
Yep.
just your usual beeps and boops. Nothing to write
Of
home
course.
about.
And well, like I told you, it hasn't aged well because it's a very difficult game. I mean,
Hmm.
if you don't have a walkthrough, I mean, it's very difficult to complete these days. There's a very nasty maze at the end. I think you
Of
have
course
to
there
navigate.
is.
You have to navigate the maze with the candle, so it's like it's almost impossible to solve unless you are an extremely patient person. But again, for its time, it's definitely. I mean, we can all agree it's the pinnacle of Spanish software if we evaluate the game when it was released.
Hmm.
So, I mean, a very interesting game, and I think we can possibly make this claim. It's possibly the most remade game in computer history. Dude, there have been like, since it was released, I can count at least five remakes, an official one, four unofficial one. There's one released on Steam just recently. I think it's been remade since as early as 1996. Again, you can play some of those because they are in English, so it's a very interesting title to re-experience.
Hmm. Yeah, but of course, yes. But it does come from that era where it was okay to be super
Yeah,
difficult. I mean, it's
yeah,
not just relating. You said yes, the games on its list didn't age well, but I want to point out that if you picked up most of the games from that era in general, from any part of the world, the same aspects of those games didn't age well either. So it's not really limited. So those are very much games of that time, very much inspired by the European game scene, and they take on the best and the worst.
I'm going to make an observation because I'm looking at Freddy Hardest now.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Ooh. Oh yeah, and
yeah,
we also should point out that La Abadía del Crimen is a game by OperaSoft, right?
Opera Soft,
Because
right?
we're
Opera
gonna
Soft.
have a bunch of
Yeah,
those
we're
on our
going to be
list.
going back and forth, and we can talk a bit about it. But I wanted to point out Freddy Hardest for this comment because talking about mostly about the second one, in South Manhattan, which has a style sort of inspired by Manhattan Dealers,
Mm-hmm.
incidentally.
Yeah.
Because I think Manhattan Dealers was released in 1987, and this Freddy is from 1989.
89, the second game. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Um, it's not a necessarily difficult game, but the thing about these games was that they try to do so much with such uh, low-powered hardware that they are unnecessarily difficult. I
Oh,
mean,
of course.
the frame rate of Freddy Hardest, it's such a rough scrolling,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that it's sort of you almost it's very difficult to punch and kick enemies because it's so such a rough scrolling. So it's not that the design is particularly bad. It's bad because it was never going to be good, right?
Yes.
It's because of the hardware. I mean, the games were very, very limited for the hardware at the time.
Yeah.
At least some of them.
Yeah. Actually, I do have input on Freddy Hardest on both of them because I played both of them on the Spectrum, and I've only
Ah,
played the PC versions somewhat recently, and I'm gonna say that. Oh well, hey, they didn't really age well on neither of the platform. The speed of scrolling is very comparable on DOS to Spectrum. It's just how they work, and they're
yeah.
first of all, let's point out the best accidental porn name in game history probably. It's and but like the first game is literally you sort of move back and forth in those open levels as enemies teleport on both sides of you, and you sort of have to progress and pick up various parts for your ship as you shoot the enemies, and you have almost no room for mistakes, so you just have to be really, really good. You have to work, the controls aren't particularly good. It's like many of those 80s side-scrolling action games. You just have to like sort of master the controls. Like you sort of have to put yourself down to the game's level. You have to become one with the game to play it. And Freddy Hardest, the
Yeah.
first game, is very much like it. DOS version is ugly because of the way it uses its colors. The first game. Now,
Yeah.
when we move on to the second game, now I actually think that this CGA graphics in Freddy Hardest in South Manhattan, which by the way also been released as The Guardian Angel somewhere. I don't know on which
Oh,
platform, but they actually did translate it. I didn't
I didn't
go
know that.
into I didn't look into that, so I don't know which platform it was and which country it was, but apparently it was localized. But so yeah, and here in the second game, first of all, the second game is very different. That's more of a beat 'em. That's more of a beat 'em up, and
Yeah.
and what it does on DOS, the CGA graphics actually look nice, and I'd say they're very comparable with Manhattan Dealers, which on DOS was also only in CGA. And it plays digital samples through PC speaker.
Yep. And the
So
music is really good. Yeah.
yeah,
I
so
think I think I like the game because of the music, because of the intro music, which is very, memorable. I mean, it's particularly well done for a PC speaker. So I think remember showing the game to some friends, and when the intro starts, they were like, "Oh wow, listen to that! Wow, that's amazing!" It was really nice to be impressed by that sort of thing back then. Anyway, the game is, I don't know, it's okay.
Yeah,
It's
you can
I'm not even sure if I
you can
want
play
it.
it,
And
but
yeah,
I wouldn't recommend either. Like I played both of those games on the Spectrum to death. They were, I mean, they're really engaging in that way. Like it's a real challenge. Um,
okay.
but I don't know if there's actually any actual payoff to master them. You
No,
know what I
no,
mean?
no,
Like
it's just
it's
no.
nice to
Yeah,
know that you can. That was the feeling at the time. Like it's cool. Games were so a lot of games were so difficult back in the day that just come to terms with them. It was something. It was like an achievement. So that was felt good. But there is really no reward
no,
in
nothing at
playing them
all.
because they're also very repetitive. Like once you mastered the mechanics on the first screen, you're essentially good, and it's just more of that for like the next half hour. That's basically those games.
That yeah, yeah. It's a shame because the concept. I mean, at least overall was fairly okay. But since we're talking about Freddy Hardest and Dynamic, the company that
Hmm.
produced this game, I think it's safe to say it was the most prolific Spanish game company. They released sort of, I don't know, but 50 or more titles. I
Right,
mean,
in like
more,
3 years.
more. Yeah. But a game released at the same year by Dynamic. I mean, just think about that. We're talking about companies that released 2 or 3 games on the same year. I mean,
Hmm.
that's think about that today. But anyway, um, one that has a game I want to talk about that has it has aged pretty well, has a good payoff, and a very interesting design is El Capitán Trueno, the
Mm.
Captain Thunder, which is based on a comic.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't think Freddy Hardest was based on a comic,
No, but
uh,
actually, a lot of those Spanish games have that sort of like, if not based
yeah,
on a comic book, then they're sort of either ripping off a comic book,
yeah,
or what you call it, or they just have that comic booky style. Like Freddy Hardest
mhm,
definitely has that sort of superhero look. You know, first of all, he's called Freddy fucking Hardest, and
yeah.
he's got that sort of he's got that hair with the slicked back hair and stuff, and whatever. So they're all very very cartoony.
He's an early Duke Nukem.
Yeah.
But no, not early. I mean,
I mean, he's also
or yeah,
he's
actually,
kind
yeah,
of early, and he is also
yeah,
supposed to be kind of an anti-hero, right? Like he drinks booze and stuff.
yeah.
Like those are his power-ups. Yeah, I never actually made that connection. He's like a proto Duke Nukem.
So anyway, yeah, back to Capitan Trueno. What I love, I mean, this game, I really like this one, and I replayed it a while ago, and I definitely think it has aged well because I mean, it's more screen based, so you
Mm-hmm.
have stuff to do per screen, so
Mm-hmm.
you don't have the problem of the sluggish scrolling.
Mm-hmm.
The design is fairly nice. I mean, you play this Capitan, which is, I mean, you have the captain who can beat enemies with a sword, but can't climb ropes. Okay, that doesn't make much sense, but anyway, you need to turn into a dwarf to climb ropes, and you can also turn into a big fat guy that he can't move,
But
but when
he can jump and like
he can
crush the
jump
ground.
crush the ground and kill enemies. That's really,
It
like
looks like a really cool game. That's the kind of game I wish I knew about like
yeah,
25 years ago.
yeah,
I would have played it. I'll probably go and revisit it because like I was looking into that. I saw some videos and stuff,
yeah,
and it
yeah.
looks really really cool. It's almost like occasionally like the Lost Vikings kind of, but you're all one character. You just transform into them.
Exactly.
And the CGA
Yeah.
graphics look really nice, and it also does digital sound out of PC speaker.
The sound is very nice. The graphics look quite sharp. I mean,
Yeah.
it looks it's CGA, but they do some really nice dithering in the images, so it looks pleasant. I mean,
Yeah.
even for it's I'm tempted to say it's one of the nicest looking CGA games I have ever seen. And you mentioned something about the payoff earlier with
Mm-hmm.
Freddy Hardest. This one definitely has some payoff because it's more puzzle oriented. So you definitely have some payoff in this game because as you make progress, you have new challenges, new rooms. I mean, there's definitely an interesting progression. New enemies are introduced,
Mm-hmm.
new problems. It's a very short game, but I mean, especially because of that, I think it's worth playing
Mm-hmm.
because definitely one of the better Spanish games in my as I see it. One of the one I think one of the one that has aged better, and again, Dynamic. I think this was overall the company that produced the better games from the era.
Yeah, it seems like a cool, action and puzzle blend. With some, it's like the action is the action, and then it's light on the puzzles. The puzzles are like who do you transform to, which sequence you do in events, and which lever do you flip, and which rope you climb on. But like these are the kind of games that are nice. Usually,
Yeah,
there's more than one thing going on, and it's cool.
exactly. It's a very satisfying gameplay, even today. Um, what else did we have? Okay, let's go back to uh, Opera with Livingstone Supongo.
Oh yes,
With
well, that's a big one.
Livingstone Supongo, yeah, I don't know why it's a big one actually. Livingstone Supongo translates to
And
Livingstone,
I
I
presume,
presume.
which it was. I don't know if the DOS version was ever translated, but the other versions were.
Hmm.
Yeah.
We had a saying at school because it's Livingstone Supongo. We said Livingstone. I presume it's a piece of shit, and yeah, it kind of was. The second one, I mean, the second one is the one I played the most back then. It's again a damnably difficult
Yes,
game,
absolutely.
very, very
Which
awfully.
is weird. I have to say that I didn't. I sort of didn't make that connection until I looked at the game, but it's in sort of Eastern Europe. Livingstone, I presume, was somewhat spread on some computers, and also so did it's sort of that game itself is a successor to another game, which is it's sort of a spiritual successor to Goody.
Goody.
Yeah, and they're very similar games. And Livingstone, Goody was a hard fucking game, and
Yeah.
Livingstone, I presume, is even fucking harder.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not. I mean, I never played Goody. I know it's one of the most, more popular games from the
Hmm.
era because well, Spanish game. Sorry, because it was one of the first ones. But I'm not so sure why Livingstone is that well known. But I mean, clearly it was because in
Yeah.
Argentina it was one of the games we got from Spain. So
Hmm.
maybe it was a publisher effort to. I mean, it was very well distributed. So maybe
Could
it
be.
was all about that because it's not a particularly good game, not even for the era. I have to say, um, the first one at least, it has an interesting challenge because you have like this stick, right?
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
you need to well the second one had you have the stick, but it's more action based
Hmm.
because of the scrolling. Maybe
Hmm.
in the first one because it's room based, you have sort of like in El Capitán Trueno, you have room based problems.
Yes.
So you need to aim with this. You use the stick to jump, and you need to aim where you're going to land. I think it's impossible to aim where you're going to land exactly. That's why the game is so bloody
Yeah,
difficult.
it's
I
really
mean,
hard.
it's it's not even worth playing. I have to say because it's
A
frustratingly
lot of
damn.
people listening to this now are like crying because you're shitting on probably one of their favorite childhood games, but it really isn't a good game. I would say I'd rather play Goody than Livingstone, I presume,
Maybe right. Yeah.
because it doesn't have that jumping mechanic. Goody just jumps. So like it's already missing there,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's basically it's sort of an open world platformer where the rooms are challenges, and you have to collect like however 25 things of gold before you unlock a different area, and then you have to complete a whole more challenges and
Right.
find Dr. Livingstone. And yeah, it's like all good platformers of that time. It's one touch death, so
Yeah.
it's that sort of game. it's maybe not as crazy as, let's say, Jet Set Willy, right? But it's not far behind.
It is, yeah. And since we're talking about these games, well, I think lots of Spanish games. I don't know. Clearly, they were a thing in Spain because I remember. Well, Micromania, the Spanish magazine.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, crazy about Manic Miner and Jet Set Willy. So clearly, they were like very popular games in Spain, and possibly some of the games that kickstarted the whole Spanish game industry. I don't know. That's my impression because clearly all of these games we are discussing can be sort of traced back to Manic Miner and Jet Set Willy.
Just a lot of British games, just in general.
Oh, okay, yeah. But anyway, we're talking about the mechanics in Livingstone, I presume, and
It's a weird fucking title.
Yeah, and I mentioned in my list Poogaboo, La Pulga, or the Flea.
Oh god.
This is okay. Yeah, it's also horrible.
That is like such a weird thing. First of all, it's called Poogaboo, right?
Poogaboo. Okay.
La Pulga dos, right? Because the first one never made it onto DOS. One thing that I would like to say that's one of the few games that I've seen available in like 3 different modes. It had CGA, EGA, and VGA, which like for a Spanish game is like looks like almost unheard of. Granted, it's also happened to be in 1991, but still, that is a weird fucking game.
It is. But I think it at least sort of improved the mechanic of Livingstone, I presume, because you jump like in
an arc,
arches to arcs, exactly, and at least you could aim a bit better to where you wanted to land. It is a weird game, though. I mean, it's even hard to describe. You're just somewhere. I don't know where.
Yeah, you're like a frog. You're like a frog. You're at the bottom of the pit. And
you're not a flea. Why the fuck is it called the flea? Because
is it the flea?
You're not a flea, right?
Oh well, I guess it's why it's jump. I looked at it and I was like, that looks more like a frog to me than a flea. But I guess flea would make sense as well. Nothing makes fucking sense. So, you're this jumping creature at the bottom of a pit with the, sort of island little, pieces of land that you can land in the middle of the air, and you need to. You jump in arcs that you can that you sort of preset those things, and you need to get out basically, and not hit any enemies on the way. And if you mistime your jump, you sort of bounce off the walls and stuff. It looks brutally difficult and
very unforgiving. I think I'm not even sure if I even passed the first screen, but I did play. I did try a lot back then. I mean, it's one of the games. I love difficult games. You can say I'm a masochistic gamer, so I kind of liked Poogaboo because of that. But I'm not even sure if I was able to get to the second screen. I mean, it's that difficult. But at least it has a better it has better controls than Livingstone, I presume.
Mm-hmm.
At least that. And like you said, PGA, quite an advanced game for its age. I mean, that's the thing about Spanish software. They were, at least in some regard, they were like pretty advanced for their time.
Well, for their market, I guess, because a lot of those games, like Spanish games, held on to CGA for a long time. But all of those games, most of those games that we talked about, I mean, let's face it, like stuff, a lot of them here on our list are like from 87, 88. That's when, in America at least, and in Europe, games, more in America than in Europe, but, EGA was already around, and by 87, Adlib was introduced and Sierra was pushing it, so, and MT32.
Yeah.
So those games sort of, but, the market was different there. It looks like most of those games a lot of them seem to be targeting very low range machines. At least the 80s games, not so much the 90s. But like if you had an XT, you would probably be able to run quite a few of them.
But you're right about that observation. It's true. They stuck to CGA for a long time. But let's see. At least you have to admit, Narco Police. It's a very long game for its age.
That is an interesting game, and yeah, it looks fucking incredible for 1990. I mean, it looks better on the other 16-bit computers at the time.
Yeah.
But it's one of those games that got published outside, and it's actually developed by Byte, the same people who did the Freddy Hardest sequel, which is really weird.
Actually, I I have a story about that. I didn't know, but Byte, they told me last year they some guys from Uruguay. I could actually
Really?
meet them. Yes, Freddy Hardest and Narco they are actually Uruguayan games. I mean, they were published in Spain by Dinamic, but they told me I need to confirm this. I mean, I need to get in touch with these people because Uruguay is like they are neighbors, right?
Yeah,
But
wow.
yeah, they told me that Freddy Hardest is an Uruguayan game. Yeah, I don't buy it. They are from Uruguay. Believe it or not. Yeah.
But yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. No, but Narco Police does look cool. It's almost like a proto, like, well, I don't want to say third-person shooter, but you move through the levels, through the maps, and you can go, you can move forward. Like inside, it's like proto 3D where it uses those
Yeah.
pieces of scenery and it sort of just scales them as you get closer. There's no rotation. Your guy actually rotates on screen to go left and right,
Yeah.
but to move forward, it's a very impressive sort of visual. Before I could see it, there's this early Psygnosis game that does a similar trick, sort of like an action RPG thing, but I always forget the title of. It does the same thing, actually better, but I think that it's also a slightly newer game, maybe a year. Maybe either the same year or a year after. So I'm not too sure now because I can't. I'll remember the title eventually. But yeah, Narco Police looks very impressive, and it looks like it plays really well, and also even has like a strategy element to it.
Bit, yeah.
So it's hard if people cannot picture what am I describing by that sort of zoom in scaling technique. Just look up the videos. It's really cool.
It's not just zooming and scaling because I mean,
It
yeah,
also
but
pans the
if you
things
move,
around when
it
you move from
pans.
side to side. It gives
Exactly.
you like the depth thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So the 3D effect is very well done. I mean, very well done. We're talking about CGA in 1989. It has a BGA mode,
It
but on
does.
CGA, that's damn impressive.
Yeah. And its
And
VGA mode is weirdly, I think only, I that don't quote me on that, but it looks like it's only 16 colors at the time, at least to me.
yes, it's maybe a 16 color palette, but I mean, it's not EGA.
Oh no, it's 16
Okay,
custom
yeah.
colors. Yeah, but I think it's
Yeah.
just picks 16 colors out of the
It
whatever
looks a
VGA
bit
range.
like Bitmap Bros games. It seems to use that sort of palette, you know,
Almost, yeah.
more or less, almost.
Not as good.
Not as good, of course, but again, this is a game. I mean, it's simple. It's a very simplistic game, but it's still kind of fun to play. You know, like an interesting achievement. I'll give it that. We hardly talk about Opera Soft. I think Opera did like the weirdest games. Okay,
Yeah.
Sol Negro or Black Sun.
hmm
I don't know why I like this game. I think it's the strange environment or mood it has. It's again, it's not. It's very damn difficult. I mean,
Yes, of
we're talking
course.
about
It's
games.
another one of those side-scrolling action games, basically.
You have like stuff flying at you of from both sides of the screen. It's not even easy to evade those things. I mean,
hmm
you're like it's a question about when you're going to die rather if you can right avoid them and again because of the extremely sluggish scrolling I think
hmm
it's even worse than Freddy Hardest. It's very very difficult because of that.
But it looks
um,
good.
it looks good.
Yeah,
I'm
and
not sure
especially
what.
for 1988, I looked up the DOS version, and that's when
Uh-huh.
most other games are still in CGA. This game is actually in EGA.
Yeah.
And it has this sort of like really crazy style, like just like fucking crazy. You know, this dude with the big head on jetpack. Well, one of the characters, right? And then it has this weird story, which I think is ripped off from Lady Hawk. At least a third of it, because you apparently get to play as three different characters, and their alternate forms or something. But I don't
Okay.
think I would ever make it that far. It's one of those where it's brutally difficult, and it's the same kind of thing where you just move, screen scrolls like Freddy Hardest, and then things just spawn on both sides of you. So
It's nuts, and I never understood the story if it had any. Maybe yeah, it's ripped off from Ladyhawk. I do recall. I mean, at some point you see a caged eagle. I don't know if you need to set it free or whatever, because I was never able to do anything with that eagle. So I don't know what the fuck. I'm just, I'm just moving forward and trying to survive. That's the point of the game. But I kind of liked it. Something funny about these Spanish games, at least I didn't see it much in other games. They used the a combination of keys, Q A O P.
OOP, yeah,
That
as
I
well.
haven't seen
It's inspired again by the Spectrum games and stuff.
by the
Like,
Spectrum games. Right, right,
it's like a
right. Yeah,
standard one of the few standard things, and QAOP is very common.
yeah. So yeah. Anyway, but since we're talking about these side-scrolling games that were so popular in Spain, I mean, the tons of them. I think they finally get it right with Risky Woods.
Yeah, but that's
Okay,
also
like
like
after
very that's sort of late.
very late.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's 1992, and it's a game that's I'd say, well, I wouldn't say it's well known, but it was well received in the DOS world because, well,
yeah.
first of all, it's a dynamic software game, right? Code
Mm,
developed by Zeus Software, published by Electronic Arts in the States at least,
yeah,
and maybe in Europe as well, or maybe it's like US Gold or something. Um, and yeah, it's a beautiful, like really cool, like Amiga looking 16-bit like action platformer. It's the same sort of genre of the game again, where you just need to survive. It's brutally hard. Like
it's very hard.
by level 3, you have no chance because you like sort of you need to make those jumps that are like you need to be really perfect. And you're
Yeah,
this guy that
it's
just moves to the right or to the left, and there are enemies just spawning into you. The graphics are beautiful, very creatively designed. The enemies and backgrounds and stuff. There's
the
cool
controls
music,
are
sound
very
effects,
nice.
and yes, the
That
controls
is the
actually don't
controls
fuck with
work.
you. That's the
They
thing.
work
That,
great. Yeah,
yeah, controls are good, and you need good controls because you need to make really precise jumps. And yeah, like level 1 is doable. Like it's weird how like the first level you're like, oh okay, I get it. Like by the second level you're like, oh my god, what the fuck is going on? Like it
yeah.
gets hard quick, but it's actually really like presentation is top notch. The controls are good, scrolling is good. I mean it's a very nice looking VGA game, but yeah,
I think it's safe to say, that maybe it's even if it's symbolic, but it's we could say that Risky Woods was the end of this golden age of Spanish software.
pretty much it looks like by 92, like 91, 92 is,
Yeah.
and that's it.
So I mean, it's a nice send off in a way. It's again very unforgiving,
Yeah,
but it's a pretty
and with a bang, so to speak.
and with the bang. Yeah, I mean, it's a good game. I
Hmm.
mean, difficult but good game, and definitely very well produced.
Hmm.
Definitely. Um, I think those were the side-scrolling games we needed to cover, and yeah, possibly the most noteworthy ones. I was just going to mention La Espada Sagrada, which is Topo or Topo, yes, because we barely talked about Topo. Topo are I'm getting confused now. It's Opera or Topo from Sol Negro? No, Topo.
Sol Negro, opera. I
Opera. Okay, well, um, Topasoft, I mean, I always confuse them because they did like sort of the same games. I mean, they're very similar. They even look the same, right? But anyway, I like this one because it is sort of a side scroller, but more puzzle based,
hmm.
and definitely not as difficult as other ones. I uh, I had fond memories of this game, and I actually remembered about it like 5 minutes before this podcast, so maybe I need to replay it at some point. Maybe my memory is failing me, but I still have like fond memories because again more like room-based problems, and you definitely needed to use inventory items. So it's a sort of hybrid. Definitely one I'm going to try to check it out again in a few days.
Mhm.
See if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, yeah, La Espada Sagrada or the Sacred Sword from Topo. Okay, what else did we have? Mad Mix. I don't know why I mentioned Mad Mix to you. This, yeah, I mean, this is also from Toposoft.
Mhm.
Um,
Also, apparently known as the Pepsi Challenge. So I don't know. I don't
yeah,
know on which platform or which country, but I guess Pepsi, I guess at one point acquired it for whatever branding as a branding game. That's actually is a pretty cool game. From the
it is
looks of
cool.
it, it's like it's in CGA, but it's clearly Pac-Man,
Hmm.
but almost Pac-Mania style. You know, when it's zoomed in and scrolling. So it's a scrolling Pac-Man with the face, almost like 3D, and you got some bonuses that turn you into like different things, like a vacuum. You can like suck up things and stuff.
Exactly.
So it looks like a really sort of polished, like sort of Pac-Man update. So I don't know if you have anything to add
It is. No, no. I
to
think
that.
I wanted to mention the game because I had like fond memories of it, and it reminds me from Supaplex. I know you're a fan of
Oh yes, I am
Supaplex.
a big fan, but it's
So
that's a bit different. I mean,
it's a
Superplex
bit.
is Boulder
It's more
Dash.
Boulder Dash.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know,
this
I
is
know.
clearly
It's more
Pac-Man. The only, you know what? When I was a kid, I did actually associate Superplex with Pac-Man a lot because Murphy, you know, flaps his
because
mouth.
Murphy. Yeah,
Yeah, but in
possibly because
reality,
of that.
it's like when I got older, I was like, I don't think there is nothing from
There's nothing. Yeah, yeah.
Pac-Man in Superplex except for the fact that he just like flaps his mouth open and
You know,
closed.
we,
Yeah.
we could say that Mad Mix is a sort of sophisticated Pac-Man with a better sense of progression because I mean, at
Yeah,
least
but it's
we have different
also
levels.
did Pac-Mania exist at that point?
Maybe no.
Pro
I
I don't
I'm
know. I'm not
trying
that
to
good
think.
on arcade and console games. I just know that I had it on my Nintendo, and it probably did. I mean, Pac-Man,
Probably no. It probably is. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Probably is because it's
88. Yeah, a
1988.
bit
Yeah,
a
yeah.
bit
In
too
Pac-Man, yes,
late.
probably
Yeah,
86, 87.
like that's, but it has that sort of a. If it,
Pac-Man,
I
yeah.
mean,
Pac-Man is 87. 7. So okay, yeah, yeah. It's
I mean,
really.
I mean, for all we know, it could have been. I mean, it's far enough removed from it where it could have not been inspired by it. You know, like it's obviously inspired by Pac-Man, but maybe they didn't see Pac-Mania, but sort of had the very similar ideas.
Yeah.
Who knows? Because it's not
Who
quite
knows?
that.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't
Exactly.
copy a lot of that, but it's
Uh,
clearly it's sort of its own upgrade on the original Pac-Man formula.
okay. And checking the list, we have two more
We have
games.
two.
Two, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, we barely discussed adventure games. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Pendulo is well known. I think we all know about Igor, Hollywood Monsters, Runaway. So I don't think it's really there's not much sense in discussing that. I'm just going to say I mean I love Igor.
That's a
It's
good
one of
game.
my it's a good game. I think it's a very short game, and it should have been longer because the concept is really nice, like an adventure game based on a university. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you. I think it's the only adventure game that did that.
Also,
Um,
the only adventure game that had the most inconceivable word right in the title. That was
ah,
ballsy
yeah.
to name the English. I don't know what the original version is called, but
I mean,
the English version is called
yeah.
Objective with we
I
Coca-Cola.
don't know. We cajon, yeah.
Yeah. Oh
Whatever.
God, who
I
would do
become
that?
I became good friends with some of the Pendulo guys, Rafael Latiegui and Josue Monchuan. So and if you remember Just Adventure, I wrote the first English review of Runaway when it was released, and I think I also wrote the one of the first, or at least in Just Adventure, one of the official reviews of Igor. And I think it holds up very well, except for an awful maze near the end of the game. Again, why they insist with mazes? I don't know,
Uh,
but mazes are a thing in adventure games. I don't know why.
yeah, it's that.
Yeah.
We should make the new adventure game rulebook that says no mazes and no
No
slide,
keys,
no
no.
slide. Yeah, well, that's for sure. Well, I think we left that one behind finally, but
Yeah.
we still struggle with mazes, and we still really fucking struggle with sliding tile puzzles.
Oh yes, I
Like,
did. Oh,
unless you're allowed, which there's been 2 games that now allow you to actually hit a sliding tile puzzle instead of solving it. So maybe we're moving towards, but please, people, adventure game developers, no more mazes and no more sliding tile puzzles. Unless you're gonna subvert it in some kind of a clever way, don't fucking do it. You're better than this.
talking about adventures. We had Los Templos Sagrados, or the
Sagradas.
Sacred Temples.
That's a bit
Again,
of an
another game with
interesting
sacred.
thing. That's a bit of a sort of a late kind of thing where for 1992, it's an interactive fiction game with the EGA graphical screen, kind of like not like EGA graphical things, but just a graphical depiction. Recently, what's the game that I played a little bit that was like that Scapegoat.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Sort of that sort of style. And from what I understand, the parser was very sophisticated
Yeah.
as well. But that's as far as I know. It's in Spanish, and that game is
I don't.
completely
I don't think
inaccessible
the.
to
I
me.
don't. I don't think the parser was that sophisticated.
Yeah,
I should probably read it. I
that's
don't
what
think
the
it
review
was.
said. So that's all I'm going off because I cannot play that game for.
Well, I mean, the thing I mentioned in this one because it's the first Spanish adventure that I played. I learned a lot about Spanish words. For example, chalupa. We don't use that word in Argentina in Castellano,
Mhm.
but chalupa is a sort of banana boat. So I always say, okay, I learn what chalupa means thanks to Los Templos Sagrados.
Oh,
And this is actually the second one in a series. The first one is called La Diosa de Cozumel, or the Goddess of Cozumel, which was also fairly okay. The third one in the series, it's called Chichen Itza, which is actually the worst one. It's a very even in that game, Chichen Itza, the screen was even smaller. Like it was a quarter of the screen, maybe, so you couldn't make out the graphics. I mean, at least Los Templos, even if it's a bit, uh, it's not a very good game, but it had interesting graphical style. Um, I can't say much about the game because I can't even remember the story. You're in this boat lost at sea, and you must make your way towards an island, and there's a temple, some really obscure puzzles, and that's it. The thing about this company, Aventuras AD, it's a late company. This is why you mentioned the year they began. Um, their first adventure, I think it's La Aventura Original, the original adventure, which it's actually a conversion of Adventure, the classic
colossal cave.
Colossal Cave. Thanks, Colossal Cave. It's actually a Spanish graphic conversion of
Oh,
Colossal Cave.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. I'm not even sure. I didn't play it fully, so I don't know if it's the full game, but it probably is. Um, Check out some screens
Hmm.
because it looks really good. It looks really good, especially the Amiga version, which is always the better one. Yeah. So that was the first game they did, and I think the better one. They are mostly fondly remembered because of that game.
Yeah.
They also did Habato, which is also I don't know much about that, but they say Micromania said it was a very good game, so I kind of believe them. And they did another one which I played a lot, but I don't remember much, called La Aventura Espacial, which is a sort of the space version of Aventura Original.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But again, they did short game, very few games. They're sort of maybe six games, but they're very fondly remembered by the Spanish community.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, we had to mention them. They're not worthy for being, along with Pendulo, the company, the only company that did adventure games.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, from Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the last one we had is
Oh, yeah. Save the best for last. I
the
see.
best. Yeah, yeah. I mean, this one is noteworthy because it's the I think only Spanish game with sexual content.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a sort of it's a sort of trivia pursuit, like an adaptation of a board game.
Yeah.
You need to answer questions, blah blah blah. But if you fail, and the game was very humorous in this regard, when you fail the question, the idea is that you play the game with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, ideally, a mixture of uh, boys and girls.
Uh-huh.
So you need to do, like truth or challenge. So you do the
Oh,
you
like
do the,
truth or dare?
there. Sorry,
Okay,
there. So
yes.
you do, when you fail, you must do the there, which is involved like kissing the girl or
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And the thing about the game is that the graphics were quite erotic. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's weird. It has this sort of over the top, almost sort of caricature style for everything.
yeah,
Anybody just look it up.
yeah, yeah.
And but it's moving sort of in the territory that's sort of, I guess, I would think traditionally would only not be seen till like a few years later in those German porny games, sort of
Yeah.
like that same thing. But I actually was surprised to find out that that sort of predates them. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, the art is. I mean, it's pretty explicit for a cartoony thing that it is.
It is fairly explicit for the age, especially. And again, right now there's not much to say about this game, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but in 1990, no, 1992. Okay,
Hmm.
okay, but still from Opera, and it was a very very popular game back then because of all this. But I mean, especially Alfonso Aspiri, if I'm not mistaken. He's a comic book artist.
Uh huh.
It's safe to say the most, possibly the most popular artist from Spain. He's mostly known for Lorna, which is a
Yeah,
comic
which
that
also
was
has a game
yeah, it has a game.
that I
Let's
played
talk about that. Yeah,
recently. It's one of those the same thing. You move forward, and there are
yeah, yeah. Another
there's enemies just spawn on both sides of you, and
another side scroller. Yeah,
the gimmick is that you actually have a melee attack at the close range. You can just headbutt. You can either shoot the gun or you can just hit somebody with the butt of the gun. And of course, the other gimmick is just the protagonist just has her ass out all the time. So
exactly. Yeah.
that's about it, really.
And I think he was also involved with the heavy metal.
Yes.
I'm
Okay.
exactly
With the magazine.
yeah, for the magazine. And especially, he was also involved in a series of books called Multi Aventura, and I always bring them up because they're like the Spanish response to Choose Your Own Adventure
Hmm.
books. And these ones were really, really, really good. I mean, some really good stories, very, very well designed, and of course, he didn't illustrate all these books, but the ones he illustrated were like the standout titles. So Aspiri's art is really really unique. He has a very unique style. Um, I don't know how to describe it, but always the, you can feel the motion in his works. Like
Hmm.
you see the characters moving. It's very very well done. He's an extremely talented artist, and he did work in several Spanish games also. We didn't mention them, but we have, well, yeah, Lorna, Metropolis, Army Moves. I think Army Moves is from Dynamic, yeah. So he's very prolific. Like he's been around a lot, and he did a lot of covers of Spanish games as well.
Hmm.
So I mean, we had to mention Aspiri in this brief talk about Spanish games.
Yeah, well, I mean, we went through our list. This is, I mean, seeing how we have to also stress that those are the games that you played, right, and you remember fondly. But within just a very short period of time, Spanish game industry put out a lot of games.
A lot, and suddenly I can't put my finger on what happened, but suddenly after Risky Woods, it all came to an end. I mean, I honestly can't remember. Of course we have Pendulo, but they sort of like stopped producing games. I think it was the advent of 3D, you know, and because they sort of maybe felt that they couldn't compete with that, and they just stopped making games. I don't
Maybe,
know
who
what it is,
knows?
but it just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, those games, I mean, except for like the handful that we sort of recommended to you, or if not just one or two,
Yeah.
those games are kind of, again, I stress, worth checking out because they're inspired by very different things from the Western gaming. They're inspired by sort of European um, uh, gaming culture and genres. And on DOS, those games are kind of rare. I think the only ones that are sort of big releases on DOS that everybody remembers that adhere to those similar rules are the Bitmap Brothers games.
True.
Like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
also very much like the same hardcore sort of. You have the platformers that spawn things on both of your side, and you
Yeah, and they had a very
memorization
distinct
mechanics, and they all have very distinct
yeah,
looks. But they all both
and
come.
consistent style. Yeah.
Yes, and they come. So those games come from that sort of culture. And on DOS, those genres they're never developed. I mean, because by the time DOS gaming became prevalent, those were things that were falling by the wayside already. But in a country like I guess Spain, where technology maybe have been a little bit behind, and other 8-bit computers were prevalent, that they did what they knew, and I mean they did it well, and certainly in large quantities. So I think it's an interesting part of history. That's now, again, I always say DOS history is disappearing. This kind of DOS history is nearly gone because nobody cares. I mean, this is literally like a period of like 4 or 5 years, right? More 4 than 5. That sort of a big output happened in this very sort of small part of the world, right? That is only. I will say that a lot of those games are accessible because you don't need to know Spanish to play them, but some of them you do need to know Spanish, and so they never spread. Outside. I had no idea about most of them. And so this is the kind of history that is disappearing that we need to talk about, that we need to preserve, and it's cool
Absolutely.
to have an
And
opportunity to talk about it.
since we're talking about that, I mean preservation.
Oh
It's a
yes,
big deal for me, and I'm totally behind abandonware. And I mean it needs to be done. I mean it's our responsibility to ensure
absolutely.
these games live on. So just a quick shout out to Computer Emuzone. It's an Spanish abandonware site who has been around for ages, and I mean since around Home of the Underdogs, and it's still running.
Mhm.
So, Computer Emuzone, it's definitely a big shout out to them for ensuring these games are preserved and discussed to these days. I think they have a Spanish and an English version. I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure. But anyway, yeah,
Well,
that's it.
thank you for being here, sir.
No, thank you for having me.
Always,
Yeah.
anytime. You might actually maybe one day you'll come back and we'll talk about horror games. Although I know you've talked about, at least both of us will be prepared.
We should. At least it only took us 3 years, so maybe in another 3 years we can talk about horror games.
Yeah, when
right?
I have a long gray beard.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if people aren't familiar with you and your work, where can they find you and contact you on the internet and find and maybe read or look or play some of your work?
Twitter, Facebook. I don't know. I'm always around someplace. I mean, our website, which is we need to update it. But anyway, it's our main spot. It's senscape.net.
Hmm.
And I hope to be talking more about Asylum in the coming days because we made much progress and the game's looking great. And I hope people will enjoy it just as much as Scratches, which I'm I'm really happy with how that game turned out, and how, you know, how many people I managed to know, thanks to that game. I know it's a beloved adventure, and we are always doing, at Senscape, ensuring we do something like that, something
Hmm.
that, uh, again, lives on, because after all, that's what matters, like
Right.
doing stuff that in the
Of
end
course.
people remember fondly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway.
That's great. And you can find me, dear listeners, at Das Nostalgic on Twitter or anywhere else. And please, if you have a topic that you think you can talk about for an hour or two, just find me on Twitter, and you can be here talking about stuff that maybe needs to be talked about. Well, thanks, Agustin, for being here, and thank you to everyone who listened. And hopefully, we'll see each other again on another episode of Das Nostalgia podcast. Goodbye.
So long. Bye.